carving your block, you're ready to start printing, or at least to do a proof and make sure that you like your image. So the first thing to do, as always, is set the press so that it's ready to go when we've inked up our image and we're ready to print. With relief, unlike etching, we're going to use this masonite board. Some people use a board in combination with blankets. So far I've just been using this masonite board that has a smooth side and a rough side. Make sure to use the smooth side, or if you use this textured side, you're going to get texture in your print, and we want like a nice smooth solid print. So the block goes down like this. I'm going to be testing the pressure, so I'm going to put just a piece of newsprint like that and place my board down like that, because that's going to be my thickness that's going through the press, and I'll use that to set the pressure. So I'm just going to lift up the pressure a little bit so I can put my block underneath. See if that works. Perfect. So now that I'm under the press, I can start bringing down the pressure. Again, we want to make sure that we're setting them both at the same time, bit by bit. So I'm starting to feel some resistance there. I'm going to check on my numbers and make sure they're the same on either side. And I actually have a number here that says for MDF, we're doing 9/5. So I'm just gonna, my first pull will just be a test to make sure that it's printing evenly. You don't want to start printing on your good paper right away. But that's just how you would set up a press if you were in a print shop that you'd never worked in before. You know, try to find a nice even pressure, pull some proofs and tweak the pressure from there. Here we have 9/5. Just be careful. I'm going to try to make sure that all the boards are consistent, but depending on what thickness of board you're using, the pressure might change. So just be aware of that. Once we've set the press, we're ready to start mixing our ink and get ready to print our block. So I'm going to demonstrate how to do a blend roll. This is a blend roll that I did the other day as a demo with students. Basically, it just means a gradation from one color to the next. You can do a 2-color blend roll. This is a 3-color blend roll actually, but you can do as many colors as your roller will allow. With the blend roll, we're going to use a larger roller. So depending on which direction you want your colors to go, so in this case I wanted the blend to be this way. So when I'm rolling the ink onto my block, I need to go this way along the block. If I wanted the gradation to go this way, I would need to get, this roller's like just the right size. But you don't want to like miss either side. You could get roller marks. So we do have a bigger roller if you want your blend to go this way. But for doing this kind of like nice kind of horizon line, this roller is perfect. If you're just inking your block with one color, if you're just inking a block with the one color, using the one roller, obviously you're not going to get it all in one fell swoop, but you can ink like this, get some more ink in this direction, get some more ink in different directions so that you don't get any roller marks until your block is completely covered, and then print it. For our blend roll, we're going to be able to do it in one pass. So first we need to decide on our colors. So I'm thinking I'm going to do, because we already did one with warm colors, I'm going to do some with cool. So maybe like light greeny blue going into a darker blue. So I have a blue here. I have this really cool viridian green. And then I have white, relief ink. Relief ink is different from etching ink because it's less stiff. This allows us to roll out nice, even flats, whereas the stiffer etching ink was used to make sure that the ink didn't come out of the lines. So relief ink is a lot looser. And then I also have Set Swell, which is a tack reducer. I'm gonna add a little bit of this to each of my inks. This just makes sure that the ink is going to roll on evenly onto my block. It also sometimes keeps the layers open to receive another layer of ink. If I'm mixing a light color, mixing oil-based inks is a lot like mixing oil paints, so you always want to start with the lighter color. So if I want a light green, I'm gonna start with white. And then this color has this kind of gross layer on top. I'm gonna peel that off afterwards, but just, you know, don't gouge the ink, just grab a little bit from underneath and that layer will actually protect it. So I'm gonna mix a little bit of this green into this white. Again, to make a light green or turquoise, I'm mixing a little bit of the darker color into the white. If I were to try to lighten the green by adding white to it, it would take me a lot of white to get to this like really light green color. So always remember, start with the lighter color, add the darker color, because it's always easier to go darker. It's really hard to go lighter. So I want that to be a little bit darker. So now I'm going to grab a little bit more ink. And to mix it, I'm kind of picking it up and smushing it down, making sure that there's no streaks left. All right, so we've got this light green. Let's take some white again for the blue. Grab a little bit of the blue. Once we've mixed our ink, I'm gonna take a little bit of the Set Swell. You only want to mix about 10% maybe. If we're having issues with the ink later, we can always add more. But start with less and we'll work our way up. So I'm mixing it into the ink thoroughly. This green to go to this blue to go to an even darker blue. So I'm gonna take more blue and this time I'll add white to it. So we'll have this transition from kind of a greeny blue to a lighter blue to a darker blue. Close up our inks so they don't dry out. All right, so to roll out the blend roll, I'm gonna take my roller. Again, I cleaned this roller personally, but I never trust anything in the print shop. So if you're not sure who used this before you, you might want to give it a quick clean with some simple green and paper towel. We don't degrease the rollers with denatured alcohol because it can cause these rubber rollers to dry out and crack. So once you're sure that it's clean, we can start rolling out our colors. Because I want this gradual transition, I'm going to place them accordingly. So I'm just kind of using the length of the roller as a guide. You could also do this on the roller, up to you. Because I want there to be this transition, I'm kind of staggering them so that they overlap a little there. All right, so I have my ink laid out to the length of the roller. And now I'm going to roll over it. When I come back, I'm gonna pick it up and flip it so that the ink lands in a different place. Pick it up and flip it so that it'll roll out into a nice and even slab. So as it starts to roll out, you can start to kind of jog it a little bit from side to side, and this will help those colors start to blend. So we want a nice, smooth transition. I'm thinking I might need a little bit more of this lighter color here. Back and forth, back and forth. And I don't know if you can hear that noise, but it's just kind of like a gentle hiss. That's what we want. If you put too much ink down, you're gonna get a noise that sounds like kind of a slurping noise that you can hear from really far away. That means you probably have too much ink. And you'll just want to like scrape some up off your slab and then roll out again. If we were rolling a solid color, I would recommend going in this direction, flipping your roller so that you have a nice even coat. Because we're doing a blend roll, you don't want to do that. Otherwise, you'll blend your colors in this direction and we'll lose that nice gradient. Try to remember which direction your colors go in, because if you come here and you switch sides, you're going to blend your colors all together and lose your gradient. So now we're ready to roll our colors onto our block. All right, so I want my block to be in this direction because we're going to go from light to dark. I'll grab my roller, situate it on here, You can see the image coming up on the roller. All right, I'm gonna go get some more ink. And come back. Basically, I'm just trying to make sure that the ink rolls out evenly. I had printed this in red yesterday, so I can kind of see where more ink needs to go, and rolling it out. All right, so that's looking pretty good. If this is your first time proofing it, you'll be able to see some areas that you might not want to print. Like in the face here, I can see that what I've carved away, even though there's like that texture there still, it's picking up a bit of the ink, and that will actually probably print. And this is what we call chatter. Depending on what your image is, that might be something you want to work with. For me, I don't want it. So I am just going to carve up that area and try to push it down as much as possible. So you can make revisions here, which is the nice part about relief. It's very immediate. Another thing, if it is like continuing to pick up in here and you're like, you have this big white space that you want, don't want that. Make sure none of your little bits get in your ink, because that will also cause it to print. You can put some talcum powder and that will dry the ink and cause it to not print. All right, so let's pull a proof. So again, I'm not really sure what this pressure is like, so I'm gonna pull a proof, put a piece of newsprint down, another piece of newsprint on top, and our masonite smooth side down, and I'm gonna run it through. So that felt maybe a little bit light. I'm just gonna kind of peek under. I'm gonna wanna add more pressure just on this side, actually. Try it again. Take a peek. Ooh, now it's moved. Actually, that's perfect. So there's our proof, looking good. Now I'm going to switch to the good paper, because the good paper is actually a little bit thicker than the newsprint, so we'll have our final results there. But that looks good to me. So now I'm going to ink up my block again. I want to situate it so that it's the light to dark, because I don't want to mess that ratio up. If you need to put more ink down, you can. Might just freshen it up a little bit. Normally you'll only need to add ink to your palette every like 2 or 3 prints. I just like to start with less ink and add more, because it's always, again, easier to add more than to take away. Got a hair on my roller. If you are one of those people that rolls out too much ink, a way that you can tell that you have too much ink is by the noise. Also, if you're putting too much ink on your plate, the ink, or on your block, the ink will actually kind of move off of the surface of your print into the white areas where your paper is, and that could cause like blurring of the lines. Your lines won't be nice and crisp, so that's something that could happen if your ink is too thick. So I was just doing it again because I noticed that there were some parts here that were showing through. It's looking good to me. There is a little bit of chatter there, but since this is my first print on good paper, well, I guess I'm gonna carve it away. Be careful of your fingers. And make sure to, sometimes these get in the way and get into your ink, so make sure you throw these out or move them away. All right, let's see what it looks like on good paper. In terms of registration, I've made these little templates. We're only doing one color, max 2, which I'll show you how to register the other color. So we're gonna kind of eyeball it with help from this template. So I'm gonna place my 9x12 block within that template, and then I have an 11x14 border around it, so I'm going to kind of eyeball placement there. Then I'll smooth it out a little bit because the ink is oil-based. It'll hopefully stick to the paper so it doesn't move when we place things onto it. Place the board down and then roll it through the press. A little bit more pressure now. All right, that looks really good to me. Even though there was some chatter there, it's not showing up. There is chatter there that I could get rid of. But other than that, everything looks like it's printing nice and evenly. So if you're at this point, you know, you could pull your addition, but I'm gonna show you how to print a flat so that you could print this image on top as well. So to print a flat, I just have this solid board. I printed a flat of this kind of sunset color. I stained it or sprayed it with polyurethane to seal the block so that the ink would come up a little bit better. And now I'm going to roll out my color onto it. With a solid block like this, you might actually need more ink, and there's no fear of details being lost because we're just printing a solid block. So you can be a little bit more generous with your application of ink if you're doing a solid block. So I'm going to put a little bit more down. The one thing also about having less ink as opposed to more is that it takes less time to dry. If you're in a rush, you can add some of this cobalt dryer to your ink, which will help the drying process, especially when we move into projects that require more layers. Only like 2 to 3 drops max of this in your ink, or it'll do something funny. So adding a little bit more ink to my slab, I can see kind of like this texture pattern of the block, which I like, but I want to try to print a nice solid flat. And the more times you ink it up, the better it'll print. So your background could be a solid color, or you could have a cool looking gradient to add interest to your print. All right. So let's see what this looks like. Place the block down, grab our paper, eyeball it as best you can. Roll it through. And there's our flat. So because of the nature of the MDF, it does have this textured surface. That might actually like clear up over time, but some people also like the natural properties of the wood. If this was a wood grain, you would have that like wood grain texture. But this, if you want a flat, in order to print your image on top, this is a good way to start. So you would print your edition of flats, keep going, and then once it's dry, about 2 to 3 days, depending on the thickness of your ink, then you're good to print your next layer on top. So I'm going to ink up my block. And take this over to the press. So I'm taking my somewhat dry print, take my block, flip it around, carefully eyeball push it off to the edge, making sure so that the print doesn't move, holding it down and flipping it. Again, kind of pressing it down to make sure it doesn't move. Placing the newsprint and the MDF and then rolling it through. We'll see what happens. Not my favorite print, but definitely interesting. So my blue block was actually a little bit larger than the red block, but it actually kind of like went over the corners. And so this is a 2-layer print with only 1 carved block. But, you know, you don't have to do these 2 colors. You could just do 1 color with an interesting carved block. But the double print option is there with a solid block. So when you finish printing and you're ready to clean up, a way to get most of the ink off of your block is to proof it a couple times on newsprint without adding any more ink. Got some scrap newsprint here, put it down. So the ink will kind of gradually remove. Now I'm gonna flip this one, switch it, run it through again. And so we'll keep, you know, just like removing most of the ink until it's completely clear. You can also grab a clean rag, especially if you're at this point, you know, most of it's gone. I'm just gonna kind of try to wipe off some of that ink so that it's dry, in case you wanted to print a different color. When we move on to the reductive blocks, you'll want to do this because we're going to be carving back into it, and if you don't, you're going to get ink all over your hands, which I already did. To clean the roller, I grabbed an old scrap piece of newsprint, especially if you're like pulling proofs or like trying to remove ink. All that newsprint, once the ink dries, we can reuse it for things like this. where I'm gonna take my roller. It does stick to it a little bit, but I'm gonna try to roll off as much as I can, and this is gonna make it easier to clean. Because if you just start cleaning it right away, you're gonna have a ton of ink on there and it's gonna be hard. All right, so you can see that it's already looking like there's less ink. I'm gonna start with the vegetable oil and some paper towel. So I'm just taking the paper towel, running it along the roller, and this is just loosening the ink so that it'll be easier to wipe off. All right, so that's most of the ink. I'm gonna grab my cleanish rag, start wiping off that excess greasy ink. Alright, so it's starting to look really good. So at this point where it's basically clean, I'm gonna grab another really clean rag and the simple green, spritz it. Take the really clean rag, and now we're gonna move back and forth. I'm twisting the roller so that I can get all aspects of it, and I can still see there's a little bit of blue. So I'm gonna keep spritzing it with the simple green and like rotating to a clean side of the rag until I get most of that blue residue off. There's nothing worse than trying to roll out a color with a dirty roller. You know, we were using light blues, so if somebody had used this for black beforehand, if they'd left any, even like a little bit of ink residue, it would affect our color. I'm also trying to do the sides here because sometimes ink can splatter there, so I'm sort of holding it and twisting, holding it and twisting, and then it's good to clean the handles. Once there's no more blue residue coming off, your roller is clean and you can move it to the side. To clean up our ink slab and spatulas, I'm going to use the razor. The razor is our best friend. So I'm just going to start scraping this up and putting it onto the scrap piece of newsprint that I got. If you have extra ink that you want to keep, you can make a little envelope with this wax paper. So just place all your ink into here and fold it up into a little pocket. If there's just a little bit left, you can just scrape it up, scrape it off of your spatula, and clean it up. We don't want to put it back into the can because we've modified it, so it'll cause the ink to mix. If you've gotten any ink on the press, clean that up with denatured alcohol or the simple green. Always the worst part, but it's very important to take your time and not rush. give yourself time to clean up. So if you don't have time to clean, you don't have time to print. Right. So now I'm even using that same paper towel and the vegetable oil, loosening the ink so it'll be easier to wipe up. Again, this would be a good time to wear gloves, but I forgot. Things are getting a little messy over here. And just fold the newsprint to get to a clean side. So I'm kind of doing things in stages. So now I'm going to clean up this area. Because I don't want to clean up one spot and then like move something and get it dirty. So just doing it all at the same time. You can use mineral spirits to clean up the oil-based ink, but it's hard on your hands. You'd have to use ventilation. So this is a really good non-toxic way to clean up. Even though it might take a little bit longer. Okay, so I've loosened up most of that ink. Now I'm going to move to my semi-clean rag to wipe up that greasiness. Wipe up spatulas. Fold this up, throw it away. Wipe up this side. And finally, we're ready to degrease. And you might have to degrease a couple times depending on what color you used. For the glass tables, I'm going to use denatured alcohol. And we want to get, there's sometimes like this haze or glow from whatever color you use. So I'm going to try to get up that bluish haze. So again, degreasing the spatulas. I'm going to use a cleaner rag to do this. Make sure, so I'm cleaning this surface, make sure you go around the edges like this, because if there's a little bit black here, this happened to me earlier, when I dip it into a color ink, that black is going to go in that color ink, and it's going to ruin your color. So make sure you clean all areas of the spatula, even the handle. That's why my hand was so black earlier, because somebody didn't clean the handle. Clean the handle and the edges. Right, so these are clean. Now I need to degrease this side and maybe go over this side once more. And then I'm going to put away my inks. And then I'm finished.